Hey everybody, welcome to the GARF Network. I'm Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight we have a very special guest on board, Mr. Greg Nicotero, who's going to share us some stories about what he's up to lately and also the early part of his career. We're going to see how far we can get tonight, and hopefully it's what's going to be a series of interviews with Mr. Nicotero. But before we get into that, Matt, why don't you tell us about how folks can contribute to the GARF?
Yeah, guys, as usual, please go to thegarf.org, George A. Romero Foundation.org, and there's a donate button. Please donate. It helps us keep the lights on. Obviously, we also have a Patreon. So please select a level, give. We are nonprofit. We're doing our best for indie filmmakers and filmmaking. So please just give us anything you can. $1, couple bucks. We really appreciate any and all support. It means a lot to us. So please go to our website or our Patreon and check us out.
And actually this month, running through October 31st, we are raising money for a scholarship endowment program, and the GARF is matching all funds through the 31st. But actually, let a special guest who made a very nice video for us. We'll let him tell you himself. So here it goes.
Hello, I'm Malcolm McDowell. This October, the George A. Romero Foundation is trying to raise $15,000 by Halloween. Now, this will help the foundation continue to honor George's legacy by restoring his work and supporting young filmmakers. And you know, George always wanted to support the younger filmmakers. He was such a true gentleman, the dearest man I know. And I just wish to God I'd had the privilege of being directed by him. But instead, I got his friendship, which meant actually even more. Anyway, if you give by Halloween, your donation will be doubled. So celebrate Halloween and the Godfather of horror by donating today. Thank you.
All right, we want to thank Mr. McDowell for taking his time to make that message for us. And yes, please stop by thegarf.org. Donate before the 31st. All donations will be matched up to $15,000. So please consider giving. Well, without any further ado, let's bring on Mr. Nicotero. How you doing, sir?
Hey. Going.
It's going well. Thanks for joining us tonight and breaking off some time for us. We know you are incredibly busy, so we really appreciate it.
No, it's great. I want to say hi to all the people that are in the comments, but I don't know how to. Hi, Jace. Hi, Richard. Hi, Stephanie Zombies. And no, it's not really your last name. Jason, sure. Misty, Laura, Stephanie Zombies. If that is your real name, that's not some name. But hey, guys, how's it going?
It's going great, sir. How are you?
Good. You know, happy to be here. Happy to, it's the week before Halloween. So I feel like it's everything that George did cultivated in this week, in terms of the release date of the original Night of the Living Dead. And so it's just kind of an exciting time.
Well, I got a question. How does Greg Nicotero celebrate Halloween?
Oh, it's kind of interesting because I've had some really great Halloween costumes, but I'm currently in the middle of directing an episode of The Walking Dead. So I have to get up and do get my makeup done early and then go on set. So I'll be filming. We're gonna do a costume contest on set on Friday, which is always very exciting. So,
we'll talk about everything you've got going on. I know I know Walking Dead's about to wrap, and you've got other series that are currently airing. What's
it's interesting. The magnitude of what The Walking Dead has become. George and I talked a lot about when we did season 1 of The Walking Dead, because Frank Darabont, obviously Walking Dead was, the comic book was very, very inspired by George. And George used to say, for a long time, I was the only kid in the sandbox, which I think is a great analogy. I love that George compared himself to a kid in a sandbox when he's talking about filmmaking. So it's his world. We're just lucky to be able to perpetuate it and to keep it going. So it's hard to imagine the main show coming to an end after such a long period of time. I've spent so much of my career up until the last 10 years, working on movies and working with John Carpenter and Wes Craven and Quentin Tarantino. And, it's really just, it's really hard to imagine, what it's going to be like. We on the show, it's a shared experience. It's like, you can't explain what it's like to somebody that wasn't there because you're in the trenches with them. When I filmed Inglourious Bastards, Quentin had used that analogy when we were wrapping the show, and he's like, "Look, man, there's nobody I'd rather be in the trenches with." And I thought that was a really great analogy because you go through these little wars and these battles, and some are victorious and some are disasters, but it's how you come out on the other end. So it's going to be really a very surrealistic experience for me to say goodbye to a lot of these people, because I've watched them get married. I've been to weddings and funerals, and people have had babies and their kids have grown up and they've been killed off the show or they've come back on the show. So it's like kind of a family. That was the thing George always did. With George's movies, it was always, you'd always see the family. It was always, John Harrison and Savini and Nikki Mistandria and Zilla and Pat Booba and Tony Booba and like all those guys and girls that were around him. So when I met George, it was sort of like, weirdly, I was immediately kind of invited to be in that family. So I've kind of been experiencing that sentiment for a long, long time. And George was the first one.
Well, speaking of George, how did you first become familiar with George's work? How did he first get on your radar?
Well, a lot of it was because of Bill Cardell. Those of you that grew up in Pittsburgh or know about the Pittsburgh horror scene. There was a TV show called Chiller Theater. And every Saturday night they would play horror movies. And I didn't know this until much later, how instrumental Bill Cardell was in helping George sort of really launch his career. They were really, really good friends. So Bill would have George on intermittently while George was working in town. And I think one of the most meaningful experiences for me was Bill Cardell played Night of the Living Dead on television, uncut, with I think like one or two commercial breaks. And this was in like 1976 or 1977. So it was kind of unheard of. The movie, I was 13, I think. And, I had never, it had this mythology about it. It didn't hurt that it was filmed about 40 minutes from where I grew up. So I remember watching Night of the Living Dead uncut on Chiller Theater late at night, and just terrified me. And I think at that point, George was on after the screening of the movie and had announced that they were doing a sequel. So it was kind of one of those things, I did know who George was also because my uncle was a local actor and he had a part in The Crazies. And my Uncle Sam had actually written a really great article about George in Cinefantastique magazine. It was like one of the first sort of retrospect articles on George. So I had known who he was. It wasn't until a little bit later that we had actually met. But you know, it's like this guy who is from your hometown who made one of the most controversial horror movies ever made. So of course you know who he is. It's just kind of the way it is.
How did you get introduced to Chiller? Were you exposed to any of the old classic horror films, or was Chiller something you just stumbled on late at night and was like, ooh, I like that?
Well, you know, my parents and my grandfather were big movie buffs. You know, we used to have, before video existed, the only way that you would be able to watch these movies is you'd buy like a Super 8 Castle Films digest that was about 8 minutes long. So you'd get the projector out and you could watch Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman or Dracula or A Creature from the Black Lagoon. So when I was very young, we would order movies out of like the Sears catalog or something, and they would come and we would watch them over and over and over again. You know, my parents were and still are big movie buffs. So we saw every movie that came out. They would go like the night, they would go see it. If it was a little questionable, they would see it the night before, and then they would take us the next day. Which always, of course, made me laugh, because one of the movies that they took me to see was Dracula, Prince of Darkness, which is probably one of the most violent Hammer movies ever made, where Clove, who's like his butler, kills the guy, hangs him upside down over Dracula's coffin filled with dust, cuts his throat, and the blood pours into the coffin and reconstitutes Christopher Lee as Dracula. It was so fucking bloody. And I looked at my mom once and I said, what made you think that that was okay for me to watch when I was 12 years old? But I guess it was fine, because, you know, here I am.
I mean, other than Night, is there one movie that stuck out from your childhood that you just would constantly go back to?
Oh boy. Well, you know, Dawn of the Dead. I mean, I'm reading all the comments. Everyone's talking about Dawn of the Dead, which I agree, Dylan Glover, that Dawn of the Dead is the greatest movie ever made. It's Dawn was kind of, you know, I had this really unique experience because I was really into sci-fi, and I was really into, like, you know, Star Trek and Lost in Space. And in the early 70s, horror, the films that were coming out were much more highbrow, more sort of intellectual. You know, you had The Exorcist and movies like that, and then you had some exploitation stuff. So I was really, really into, you know, the Irwin Allen stuff and kind of like the cheesy Towering Inferno. I just loved seeing like miniatures and models get blown up. And in the meantime, you know, Planet of the Apes and all those other movies. But so I wanted to initially like build models. I wanted to be a miniature. I wanted to like build spaceships and blow things up. And then I saw Jaws, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I want to be one of the guys that builds the sharks. Like, I wanted to be that guy, until I saw Dawn of the Dead. And then when I saw Dawn of the Dead, it kind of it just all went out the window, because that opening scene where the zombie bites into the woman's neck in the tenement. I was sitting at the Gateway Theater, downtown Pittsburgh, and I remember where I was sitting in the theater. I had licorice in my hand. I really thought I was going to lose it. And from that moment on, it's funny because I always was a little confused, because I had a permit, but I didn't have a driver's license. So I was like changing the date so that it made it look like I was old enough to get in. Like, everybody had fake IDs to buy beer, and I had a fake ID to go see movies that were 17 and older. But it just blew me away. I never really, you know, when I first saw Dawn of the Dead, I was so like unprepared for the movie. that I was like, okay, well, what's happening? Are they in a tenant? Where are they? Why are they breaking into the building? And what's going on with the zombies? Like, it was the opening scene was so disorienting to me that by the time I had a chance to catch my breath after that whole opening scene, I just didn't. Yes, it was Tommy Lafitte. Look at that. I didn't know. I was so uneasy and so unprepared for what was about to come next. And I always feel like that's probably the greatest element of Dawn of the Dead, was that you are instantly put off by what's happening in the opening, and from that point on, you don't trust what George is going to do because everything's on the table. And I love that. And I still love that.
Regarding, getting interested in model building, was there any, there was no like textbook for that, I suppose, in those days. How did you go about learning how to do that?
You just, I collected like the Aurora monster models, like Frankenstein and Dracula and all that kind of stuff. So I just was like taking like old paper towel holders and styrofoam cups and gluing stuff together. And now it's so strange to think that you only had, like, the only resource you had was Famous Monsters magazine or Cinefantastique. You'd have to study, or then Starlog came out. So you would just have to go through those magazines and stare at the photos. And, Rick Baker, a lot of makeup artists talk about, like, when they would see pictures of other people's special effects labs, that they would like try to pinpoint what was what's on the shelves.
So is there a box of Greg Nicotero home movies sitting in your parents' attic somewhere?
There is. Okay. I made two. Hold on. I have to answer Rob's question. One of the Michael Myers Mask from Halloween sequels based on your face. No, sadly, that is not true. We did do a mask for Halloween H2O. And they basically, when they first started making the movie, they didn't have the rights to the William Shatner mask. So they said, well, you got to sculpt the mask, but it can't look the same because we don't have the rights to it and we're going to get sued. So we used a head cast of somebody that worked at KNB to make the mask, and we made it look as close as we could make it look. Steve Miner was directing that one, I believe. And we made it look as close as we could based on the fact that they said it can't look like the Michael Myers one because if it does, we'll get sued. And then I heard this funny story that in the middle of dailies, somebody from Miramax saw the mask and, that's not Michael Myers. And so they ended up going and getting the rights to use the mask after all. So we kind of went down this crazy road because they didn't want to spend the money to license the mask. So see, I hadn't told that story in 30 years. Hey, Bob Micolucci.
Let's see. Well, talk about was when you first saw Dawn of the Dead, was that when you also discovered Tom Savini and his work?
Well, there was a little documentary about Tom. I mean, Dawn of the Dead was really the movie that kind of sort of that really put, Dawn of the Dead put Tom on the map. That's just, the bottom line. So after that, it was like anything that you could do to find out who this guy was. In Fangoria issue #1 with Godzilla on the cover, there was an article about Dawn of the Dead. And it was all of a sudden, you had the 1-2 punch of Dawn of the Dead and Friday the 13th. So it felt like almost overnight, Tom Savini was a household name. These movies were literally, made him a household name. So he just became, he instantaneously became synonymous with the horror genre in the 70s. So you had Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, and then it was like The Burning and The Prowler and Eyes of a Stranger and all these other movies. And it's still kind of crazy to think about the fact that a lot of these movies, Dawn and Friday the 13th made a lot of money, but most of the other films that Tom had done were very low budget films that didn't get a lot of visibility until Dawn of the Dead and Friday the 13th came out. And then all of a sudden, Maniac, there's these movies that from like 1978 to probably 1984, 85, the makeup effects artists were literally on the marquee. Like they were synonymous with the main actors in the movie, or in a lot of cases, the actors were unknown. Friday the 13th, those actors were all unknown. So it's kind of interesting to think that Tom was sort of one of the first guys that led that revolution of makeup effects artists that were able to kind of elevate material. And then you get Rob Bottin and Rick Baker and Stan Winston. So by the time you get to like 1980, 1981, then you have The Thing and The Fog and American Werewolf in London and The Howling and Creepshow. And it was, every night at the movies, seeing a different movie, Poltergeist, E.T., Road Warrior, Star Trek 2. Like there was like 2 summers in a row that was like every single weekend there was another genre movie coming out. It was probably the most prolific that the horror sci-fi fantasy genre ever was.
It's a hell of a time to be alive and go into the theater, man.
It was so much fun. And I used to save the newspapers and cut out the ads. There's a really, really great series of books that Mike Gingold did called Ad Astra, if you've ever seen them.
Yep, I have.
And basically, they have all of the newspaper ads from all of his movies. So it's really, and I miss that. I miss those days where every Friday night, you'd go to another horror movie, and it didn't matter if it was Blood Beach or Silent Scream or like some of the shittiest movies in the world. You didn't care. You were just excited and happy that there was another horror movie. Like people didn't care. They didn't care if the movie was any good or not. They were just happy to be seeing a horror movie.
Mm-hmm. Was there a movie or an effect that you saw in the theater and went home and tried to recreate like right away?
No, because at that time, the materials that you had to have to do it. It wasn't like you could just go on the internet and order stuff that you needed. You really didn't know where to start. I mean, I didn't know where to start. I mean, I knew foam latex. I knew latex. I used to take Elmer's glue and put Elmer's glue on my hand in school and then peel it and then paint it and go, oh, I got burned on the radiator. Probably it got me in trouble. Probably the coolest thing was Dick Smith had a makeup kit that came out in the 70s. I actually just saw one on eBay. It was Pressman makeup kit, and it had it came with this little gelatin material. Here, I'm not gonna screen share, but I'm gonna show you. That's Dick Smith horror makeup kit. That's on eBay right now.
Wow.
And it came with these little plastic vacuum form molds, and you could, you had this little gelatin stuff that you would mix with hot water, and you would make your own appliances. And it came with like a purple bruise makeup stick and a flesh-colored makeup stick and blood. So you could, it was probably the first time that came out in 1976. So that was before Dawn of the Dead even came out. So I was learning how to make like gelatin prosthetics in these little vacuum form molds before I even knew what the fuck I was doing. I didn't even know what gelatin was. It's just, it comes with the instructions and little measuring cups and stuff. And I think I still have the molds. I think I kept them. But it was just, it was the guy who did The Exorcist and Taxi Driver and Godfather. And so there's he sculpted all these little appliances. And if you look at them, like one of them looks like the cut on Reagan's face from The Exorcist. So you're like, ooh, I want to make one of those. Now I want to make some now. So it was pretty great.
Before we get too far along, did you have an encounter with George in Italy?
Well, that's where we kind of first officially met. So I was visiting with my family. It was the first time that we had ever gone to Europe, and we're sitting at a restaurant in Rome, and across the room was George. And my younger brother and I were kind of like, oh my God, there's George Romero. And I don't remember if he was probably there meeting with Dario about Dawn of the Dead. And so when he got up to leave, my brother and I ran over and just said, hey, how's it going? You know our Uncle Sam. And he said, oh yeah, how is he? And that was sort of like our pickup line, so to speak. And and we talked a little bit, and he had said, oh, when you're back in the Berg, my office is down on Fort Pitt Boulevard. Come by and say hey. And so as soon as I got my driver's license, I was driving down. To visit George, and that's when they got, a couple years later, they got the green light to shoot Creepshow, and they were out in Monroeville, and it invited me to come visit. And that's where I met Tom for the first time. And they offered me a job as a production assistant, but I said, well, I'm getting ready to go away to school, to college. I'm going to be a doctor, and but thanks. But if you don't mind me visiting, I'd love to come and just hang out. So I would go out there on Saturdays and sit in Tom's lab while him and Daryl were building Fluffy. So it was, I didn't even realize at the time that I was sort of there. I have some amazing memories, like of Adrienne Barbeau coming into Tom's shop for the first time to get her face cast done. And I guess when Adrienne had flown in, they took her right to Tom's shop, and I was standing in the corner, and then George comes running in, and Richard comes, they all come running in because they're like, oh my God, it's Adrienne Barbeau. Like, they were geeking out. It was really kind of funny. And then when we did our Creepshow, I had Adrienne Barbeau in my first episode, and I said, I remember that was the day that I met you. So it's kind of cool. So, hey, is it Bill Heinzman? It was really yesterday? Heidi, was it yesterday or today?
It's today.
Today. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Let's see.
Bill, wherever you are. That's nice. Okay, sorry.
No worries. You can go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say. So, what was it like? I mean, I've heard the story of you meeting George, but talk about you getting to know Tom. How did that come about? You guys have been friends now for 40 plus years.
Well, I met Tom ironically when they were working on Creepshow.
Mm-hmm.
So we just had, he kind of also sort of took me under his wing and just said, hey man, anytime you want to come visit. And I took him up on it. A lot of times I would call the office and tell George that I was coming to visit, and then I would go and I would hang out with Tom in his lab, and then George would be like, what are you doing? What? Where'd you go? What's going on? And I was like, oh, I was over watching Tom build stuff. But it was Tom and I just got to be friends, and really, when Tom would do conventions in Pittsburgh, I would help him pack all his props up. So I helped him pack up the fluffy heads and Raoul and everything. There was a convention downtown Pittsburgh that Tom did a whole presentation, and had all his stuff from Creepshow, and did a little talk, and I helped him pack all the stuff up, and of course took pictures of everything. as I was loading it all up. But, Tom was always about, we were always trading movies on VHS and beta. And that was kind of the thing with George too. George he was such a huge movie buff. And the movies that he loved, Treasure of Sierra Madre, he was a big Marlon Brando fan. So we collected a lot of movies, and I would go to visit and I would take the list. Like, here's a list of all the movies that we have. And we would trade movies. So I would make copies of movies that he didn't have, like One-Eyed Jacks and Treasure of Sierra Madre. And there were a bunch of things that George really loved. And so that it sort of made me feel like, oh, this is amazing. I get to like help out this amazing film director and allow him to sort of expand his repertoire of movies, because back then it was difficult to find a lot of those movies on DVD, or DVDs didn't exist, on VHS or beta.
You mentioned off air, and I apologize, I got to dive in on this. You were an early adopter of the VHS format, and were recording things off of TV, like in the at an early stage. And and can you talk about that a little bit? And then also, did you ever get into Laserdisc when that?
Well, here's the funny thing was, back then it's kind of like the same with like DVD or Blu-ray. In the mid 70s, it was beta or VHS. You had the choice. You could either pick beta or pick VHS. Beta was the better format, so we had a beta VCR. And at that time, I was so fascinated with special effects in movies and horror that if there was an ad, and the ad would say, oh, coming up tonight, George Romero is going to be on Evening Magazine, I would literally sit there next to the VCR and I would hit record and record these interviews. So I was showing the guys the other day, I found this drive that has all of the stuff that I used to record when I was a kid. So there's a bunch of interviews with Rick Baker and Rob Bottin from American Werewolf and The Howling, The Thing, and there's a bunch of interviews with George. And those interviews were done because I would sit next to the TV and hit record when the interviews were happening. So that was the only way that you could ever have access to any of that behind the scenes type footage. So I think that's one of the reasons why Tom and I sort of adapted this style. Every movie that I ever worked on, I would shoot, I would have a video camera with me and I would film everything. Like Evil Dead 2, I had my video camera and I would record everything that I could. Sorry. I would record everything that I could so that I would be able to just sort of remember the experience. And it was amazing. And I'm so grateful that I did, because between, Day of the Dead and Evil Dead 2, and then Halloween 5 and Army of Darkness, all these behind the scenes videos that I was shooting. And I was just doing it because I just so desperately wanted to document what I was doing, because I was so intrigued with the behind the scenes footage that I had seen when I was younger, but there wasn't a lot of it there. I mean, people didn't have the means to record stuff like that or film it. So it makes me really proud and really happy that when these DVDs come out, that people can watch the footage that I shot on set. And I've had hundreds and hundreds of people come up to me and just say, God, I felt like I was right there. I felt like I was with you, standing next to you, because of the 6 hours of making of Evil Dead 2 that I had filmed. So it really, you know, and Tom, you know, Tom was one of the guys that really kind of got me into that, because when we did Day of the Dead, he basically handed me his video player and said, record everything. So everything that we did on that movie, I recorded. So
was there ever, and this might be skipping ahead, but I just thought of it, was there ever a time where you were getting ready to go to set where you would refer back to one of those VHS tapes to kind of say, oh, this is going to be similar, I want to see what I did on, you know?
No, you know, they were really shot more to facilitate what I loved about being on movie sets. Now, of course, you know, once we started KNB and we had to start cutting reels together, and it was very difficult to get the clips from the movies. So we ended up using a lot of the footage in the shop to edit together a demo reel for KNB so that we could show people what we were capable of doing. So that kind of opened the world for us, where we were able to, you know, because a lot of times what you end up realizing is you'll spend 6 weeks building something, and then you get on set and it's on screen for 12 seconds. But what you don't realize is all the work that it takes and all the stages that you go through. You go through design, you go through the sculpture, you go through the molds, you go through fabrication, you go through painting, you go through all the tests. Everything that you do, you go through all these, and there's different artists and there's a different craft involved with the sculpture versus the mold, and then the mechanical guys and the foam guys or the silicone guys and the mechanical people and mold makers and seamstresses, and there's like an army that it takes to create one effect. And it's sometimes more exciting. The journey is more exciting than the arrival, because when you see it in its final form in the movie, you generally see it for a split second and it's over. And, you know, when KNB was really getting rolling, that was the time when Jack Valenti and the ratings board was censoring and cutting everything. So there was less and less of our work on screen. So one of the things that we did was we documented the whole process, and we documented what it was like to build it, and, you know, celebrating the artistry of the people that worked on the behind the scenes stuff. And I love that. I mean, I haven't done it in a long time, because now everybody just, you know, they do it on, hey, look, John, let's see. Everybody does it on their phones. So there's actually no real reason to walk around and film, like carry a camera around with you. I mean, I try to do it. I did some on Creepshow this year, but I'm a little busy. It's a little tough sometimes to be able to do it. And I force myself to try to remember, because I love doing it, but it's a little, you know, it was easier when I was the effects guy, because then I could have other makeup artists and puppeteers with me, and then I would film it. And it was fun. I got to do it. Keep doing it.
Keep doing it, because as someone who loves physical media, when I see a boutique label put something out and they have 45 minutes of someone's behind the scenes footage, that's usually one of the first things I watch. So please keep doing that and keep encouraging people to do it, because that's what makes us love the movies more, is seeing the stuff you guys do and stuff behind the scenes that it, to me, is just magic. And you can't recreate that with any other kind of retrospective.
No, I know. And, you know, but nowadays that footage is much easier to obtain, because you have 15 people filming things with their cameras. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of grateful that I was able to be there to capture stuff before anybody else thought about it. And ironically, you know, nobody had an issue with it. You know, like it wasn't like Sam Raimi said, "Oh, you can't film on my set. You can't." You know, I was showing the guys some footage that I had found from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 7, The New Nightmare, with Wes on set, and it's on this drive. And it just, I remember, it's like I watched the footage and then I remember being there. I remember Miko Hughes crying when we were putting the big giant Freddy head on the poor kid. I've traumatized a lot of people. I don't mean to. It's just kind of part of the job.
Well, you did show Jaws on your phone, and I realized the wormhole potential on this, but I do have to ask. I mean, Jaws and its effect on your career trajectory. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, look, I mean, just like Creepshow, the sort of full circle that I feel I've been able to sort of will into existence. I feel like I've kind of done that with Jaws, because the Motion Picture Academy Museum just opened, and there was one final fiberglass casting of the shark that was on display at Universal from 1975 to like 1991. So I always love this visual of like when Jaws came out, there's probably somebody at Universal going, smoking a cigarette going, hey, we don't have anything on the back lot for Jaws, and it's the biggest movie in the world. Why don't you guys pull that mold out and make a copy of the shark, and we'll hang it out back? And then the guys go, sure, that sounds like a great idea. So they pull the mold out and they make a copy of the shark. It doesn't have the mouth inside, but it hung by the tail at Universal. And then it went off to a junkyard, and the junkyard closed about 4 years ago, and they donated it to the museum. So I reached out to the museum and said, look, I want to be the guy to restore it. Why don't you bring the casting of the shark to my studio and we'll restore it. So we re-sculpted the interior of the mouth. I got castings of all the teeth. And if you haven't seen any pictures of the shark, because it's now on display, and there's a little plaque and it says, talks about the shark, and then it has kind of like my name. It says restoration supervised by Greg Nicotero. And I was like, little tear. Because it's almost like I worked on Jaws. I mean, I was only 11, but I kind of love that I weirdly willed that into being, just by being a devoted fan, just like everybody else that's sending the notes, and you guys, I mean, Matt, you were up in Toronto and we were shooting Land of the Dead. So it's like these uniquely dedicated fans, and I'm going to use that terminology because that's how I prefer to look at us, as loyal, dedicated fans who are whose number one purpose is to keep the spirit of the stuff that we love alive. And so it means a lot to me that people will go to the museum and will be able to see that I had sort of helped in contributing to keep the spirit of special effects and movie making alive by being a part of the restoration of the shark.
Yeah. It's a way to give back for all the enjoyment these movies and folks give us.
Well, and I, that really is a lot of it for me, because I told the Academy, I said, look, the majority of the restoration, the labor is going to be I'm going to dedicate the labor to the museum as a like a nonprofit kind of I can't think of the right word that I want to say, but I wanted that to be sort of a contribution that I had made to the museum by doing the restoration. So I'm kind of excited and hoping that next year at Halloween the Academy starts sort of rotating out some other things and has like a horror exhibit that other props from other horror movies can be on display for a month or two.
Nice.
Well, can you talk about, you were originally, on the path of becoming a doctor. What was it that, suddenly got you off of that path, made you not want to pursue that any longer?
My dad is a kidney specialist, and it was, as I was growing up, kind of like, well, you're going to take over the practice and you're going to be the doctor of the family. And I didn't know. I kind of went, yeah, okay, I guess that's, that makes sense. And for me, filmmaking and horror was a hobby. It was this elusive sort of, I lived in Pittsburgh. I never thought that I would ever be a part of something like this, that I would be able to parlay my interest in that hobby into a career. I never thought about it because that wasn't the kind of thing that people talked about in Pittsburgh until you turn around and meet a guy like George Romero. And then it's like, wait a minute, George and Tom's big mantra always was, you don't have to live in Hollywood to make movies. You can, and so if I would have grown up anywhere else other than Pittsburgh, I doubt very much that I would have skewed into the direction that I did. I feel like the fact that I was fortunate enough to meet George and to meet Tom sort of turned this light bulb on in my head of like, wait a second, you can get a job doing this. And when I got hired on Day of the Dead, my intent was I was just going to work on Day of the Dead, and I was going to go back to school, and I was going to finish my pre-med at Westminster, and I was going to go off and take my medical school entrance exams, and I was going to go to med school. Like, I just thought I'm like, I just want to try this once because it's something that I've always loved, but I always looked at it as a hobby and never really understood the fact that it was an opportunity opening in front of me. I never put two and two together, weirdly enough.
Was there a singular moment during filming where your mind changed to where I want to do this all the time, or was it afterwards in the whole experience?
No, I think it was July 23rd, 1984 was my first day of work at Savini's house. So we spent July, August, and part of September building all the effects for Day of the Dead in his basement. It was me, Mike Tursick, Dave Kinlan, Derek DeVoe, and then John Volich flew in. And then we moved to the Wampa Mines in mid-September, and October 1st of 84, we started shooting Day of the Dead. And from July 23rd on, I don't think there was one moment that I ever thought that I would turn back and go. Maybe I was in denial, or I just was saying that to my parents to make them not freak out that I was going to not be a doctor. But all of a sudden, I'm sitting in these meetings with George Romero. We're talking about killing zombies, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing. And then you get on set, and you're watching the actors, and for some fucking stupid reason, they put me in the movie, which is a whole other crazy scenario, because those of you that know the story of Day of the Dead, there was a much more expensive version. There was an $8 million version of Day of the Dead that I still have the script for, which involved them in Florida, in Fort Myers, and they get on a boat and they go out to this island, and there's this bad guy named Gasparilla, and he's training an army by feeding the zombies human flesh. And then there's a rebellion by this other group of people, and they lead zombies into the fortress. And so I used to jokingly call it the 10 Commandments of zombie movies. So that was the movie that we were making. When we started prep, that was the film. And there was a scene where a soldier is killed and his reanimated head comes back to life. So they kind of went, oh, well, Greg, you should just play that part because we need to make a head, and maybe we'll stick you in as a like an extra or background. So we cast my head, and we started making the head, and then the realities of the budget came in because Salah Hassanine, who financed the movie, was like, look, I can't do an unrated $8 million movie. We can do a $3 million movie that's unrated, but if you want $8 million to make the script that we have, you have to make an R movie. It has to be R-rated. So basically that's what happened. Was the budget got cut from 8 million to 3 million. And George said, fuck that. No one's going to tell me what kind of movie I can or can't make. And he wanted to make a movie he wanted to make. So the movie was unrated. It was a $3 million budget. So a lot of the script had to be cut because we couldn't afford to shoot it. Some of it ended up in Land of the Dead, consequently. But that's why you see very little of Fort Myers, and the majority of the movie takes place in the underground missile silo. I remember begging George when we flew down to Fort Myers right before Christmas of 1984, and I kept saying, please bring some guns, because it was great shootouts written into the original script. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to bring the armor guy. We're not going to bring any guns. And I'm like, but we're going to have this whole city street that's going to look desiccated. And there's going to be alligators crawling around. And can't we shoot some zombies? But, we just couldn't do it. So to make a long story short, so they cast my head during pre-production. And then when they cut the movie down, they were like, well, we already have a head of Greg, so maybe he should just be a character. So they wrote dialogue for me. So Tasso and I played, I was just Private Johnson, and so we're sitting outside in the opening shot of the movie. I'm growing pot and looking at Playboy magazine, and then the helicopter lands, and then later I get killed in the movie, and my head comes back to life. So I was actually written into the script because of the fact that there was a special effects head of me that already existed. And I think one of the funniest things is there's the scene where we're all sitting around talking, and they're talking, when Rhodes starts freaking out, and we're like, we used to talk to Washington all the time, and it's Jarlath and me and Tasso and everybody there. So for some strange reason, I'm the pothead of the group, me and Tasso, which is kind of ironic because I don't smoke because I have asthma, so I'm not a big smoker. So meanwhile, like in the scene, they're rolling up these fake marijuana cigarettes, but they're just nicotine with no filter. So we shoot half the day, and I'm smoking these. We used to talk to Washington all the time, and then they break for lunch. And I'm green, like literally green. Like I'm about to vomit everywhere. And George walks over and just starts laughing hysterically. He's like, are you all right? I'm like, I don't think I can walk. I was so wired. So he comes in, George is 6'4". He came over and he stuck his arm underneath my armpit and literally had to carry me to lunch and put me in the lunch table because I was smoking unfiltered nicotine for 5 hours straight. But the look on his face and the laugh, he laughed so hard. It just was a good story.
I was curious, was Private Johnson included in that scene simply because you were part of the effects team? You got to go to Florida?
Yeah. That was completely it. There's one or two other scenes when I think when Laurie's like sneaking by the room and you hear all the soldiers having the fight, and then the door flies open and they burst into the hallway. I was in that scene too. And I was standing next to Gary Clark, who was a former linebacker. And when that door flew open between Ralph and Phil Kellums and me, I was the asshole at the end that got flattened into the wall. So I think you see me for a split second, and then I had those guys crushed me into the wall, and then we're just rolling around fighting. I think I got the shit kicked out of me in that movie now that I think about it. It was fun though.
Well, Matt, did you have anything else before we kind of turn it over to questions? Or
No, we're good.
Okay, let's see. Let me pull this. Let me backtrack a little bit here.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. I was looking at them and trying not to get distracted.
Here we go. Did your parents support your decision to forsake the family business?
They did, actually. You know, it was. I got to give my folks a lot of credit because I think they just knew that I had a good head on my shoulders, and they knew that I was dedicated and hardworking. And, you know, Day of the Dead ended in January, and I moved to New York City, and I worked as a production assistant on Tales from the Dark Side for a while. And then Tom called and went back to Florida on Invasion USA, and we went from Miami to Lake Okeechobee to Atlanta. Hey, that's where I am now. And then I kind of just jumped around, but they were, you know, my mom was like still is the kind of mom, like when the movie's over and, you know, if somebody's leaving, she'll be like, excuse me, you have to sit down. My son's name's coming up. And she would tell like the people that would come and sweep up all popcorn. So she said by the end of the movie, she'd have like 10 people sitting around and she'd go, oh, there it is. Okay. I always loved that story. So they were super cool about it. And, you know, it's a pretty great situation because it could have gone the other way. And then I could have really could have been bad. So
well, here's one from Richard Catazone. He says, they all know your horror work, but maybe could you share about the great work in Narnia?
Hi, Rick. Yeah, you know, Narnia came about in 2003 and 2004. And it was really an interesting situation because Weta was originally set to do the makeup effects for that movie, but I believe they were doing King Kong at the time. So Richard Taylor was very, very good friends with my partner, Howard Berger. So they had done a lot of the preliminary design stuff, and it kind of all sort of filtered over and landed in our lap. Fortunately enough, you know, Howard was really the mastermind behind those movies, you know, the Mr. Tumnus makeups. And, you know, it was really an interesting show because I feel like the design of the creatures was probably the most fantastic element of the movie. You know, the production design, there was some elements of the production design, but for a lot of it, it felt like they shot on a really pretty mountain in New Zealand. So I was really proud of the team and Howard for all the work that we had done, because we made, you know, Minibors and Minotaurs and Boggles, and like we did 10 or 15 of each of those suits, plus all the prosthetic stuff and the Aslan puppets, and there was so much work that we did on that movie that probably nowadays they wouldn't even have ventured to do that many practical characters. They would have done a few and then just done digital for most of the other stuff. But those movies, for the most part, were shot practically. There was a lot of great practical stuff in those films. Thanks, Rick.
In regard to your video.
And by the way, Rick Catazone, those of you that don't know, Rick Catazone is the animation genius behind Creepshow and Creepshow 2, and he did some work. He did some work for us on the Creepshow series, and one of my first bosses. I built an oven for him when I was a kid, so that he could bake stop motion animation puppets. So there's famous people here. I saw who Bob Michelucci's on here. He's one of the zombies that got shot in the head.
Russ Striner is in here.
Dead.
Yeah.
Johnny from Night of the Living Dead. Russ Striner is in the house.
Is Russ here? Hey, Russ.
He's. Catherine had a question about whether or not you would if you had similar archives. Like I think she's referring to like the camcorder style footage behind the scenes.
For which film?
For Walking Dead.
I have some. I think when we shot the pilot, I have some really cool footage of the bicycle girl zombie in the park. And then when Andy came over and got on the bike, and when she rolls over and starts to crawl. But interestingly enough, I shot more photos. I did more photography than actual videos. So I don't have as many video. I have a lot, just not as many as, I guess not as many as you'd think. I'm trying to go through and Walking Dead series. I'm trying to see if I know how to share.
Okay. Very cool.
Oh, that's season 11. Can't share any of that with you. Sorry. I would get into lots of trouble.
So rename that folder "Do Not Share," so you don't accidentally do that.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah. Anyway, what else? Ask me more questions while I'm looking.
So there's another one here. A friend of the show, Will, wants to know, what are some newer movies that you love? What are you watching these days, if you have time?
Well, I watched Halloween Kills the other day. What else did I watch? That's all I can say about that. I watched Malignant the other day. That's all I can say about that. I don't know. It's interesting. I try to watch a new horror movie every week because I loved Psycho Gorman was hilarious and a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. Tigers Are Not Afraid I watched, which if you haven't seen is a great movie. Recent stuff. Look, Halloween Kills, the makeup effects were top notch. And yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of stuff that I've watched. I just like 2 weeks ago I watched Good and the Bad and the Ugly. I watched Soylent Green. Like I just watch like old stuff.
Comfort movies.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to get this comment in from Heidi Hensman. Just make sure we didn't get by it unmissed. I must say, I met Greg. He took me under his wing and let me into his family when I moved to LA. Gave me an opportunity of a lifetime. He knew I was from Pittsburgh. He knew my heritage, and he took care of me. I'm so appreciative. Not only that, but I fell in love with his wife, Sherry, and I adore her. It's very cool. Thank you so much, Heidi. That's awesome.
Thank you, Heidi.
Let's see.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna screen share.
Okay.
Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Share screen. Okay, there's the screen. Yep. And then we go into this. So these are all, look how short Norman's hair is.
Look at that. So clean cut.
There's one of our tribute zombies from Walking Dead. Oh, look at that. See, so this goes back to the question that you guys were asking before, which is I ended up doing a lot more shooting photos. Wow, look at that. Look how old that is. Jesus, that's the prison. This is like season 4.
The governor.
Yeah. Burn crispy zombies. That's blowing shit up. Season 4 selects. Yeah, see, I have all the pictures are kind of broken up into different seasons. Oh, and then what we were talking earlier about that funds the transferred footage.
Thank you for letting us in to see this. This is amazing.
Yeah, see, so this was one of the things that I was telling you about. So this is the behind the scenes of Rob Bottin's interviews with on the thing.
I always had a big imagination when I was a kid.
So
And I always wanted to.
I would literally just like sit and record all this stuff. And then you got all the press stuff with George doing stuff on Creepshow.
And there is a little bit of rough language, particularly in the E.G. Marshall section. He plays a Howard Hughes type millionaire. Who's,
Anyway.
I think that's what it is. It's a communal, it's okay.
I was mentioning before we went on air just what great quality this is that you've retained, you know, just captured it at such high quality back in the day. It's amazing.
Well, it's because I was the nerdy guy that literally sat there with my VCR and was recording it as it was on. So
I did it too, but it didn't look that good. And I did it at how I was coming up later on too. So you had some high quality equipment there.
we had some good stuff.
So I got.
And then I'm looking at Ann. Yeah, so the Joe Bob Briggs.
Oh yeah, I meant to ask.
The Joe Bob Briggs thing. I'm supposed to pretend like I haven't filmed it yet, but I already filmed it. So when you watch it, pretend like it's live. But we had a blast. I mean, look, I love Joe Bob Briggs when he was on Monster Vision, you know, and on USA 20 years ago. And we watched the first 2 episodes of The Walking Dead. And fucking hell, man, that show's good. When we first started the show, there was nothing like it on TV. And it was kind of funny. I remembered it's so obvious when you watch the first 2 episodes why people fell in love with it, you know, with Rick and the characters, everything that's being done. And I was kind of like, I started watching it as a fan and not as somebody who had worked on it. And man, it kind of blew me away. It was one of those things that I feel like for a lot of the seasons that we had done, we knew we were doing something special, and it was really something. So the Joe Bob Briggs thing was really it's going to be great. I'm anticipating a really fun interview, because but don't tell anybody, everyone that's on Facebook
and that's this Friday night on Shudder, and I believe AMC Plus will have it on, and I think it's at 9:00. So if you guys don't have Shudder, go get Shudder, because Shudder's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. And you know, Rob Bottin, Carl's asking about Rob Bottin, you know, every once in I had dinner with him. I have a great Rob Bottin story that I have to share, because Rob is a very elusive guy, and he doesn't not a lot of people see him or associate with him, or he doesn't, you know. But he and I went to dinner a couple years ago, and we went to Morton's Steakhouse, and we drank like 5 bottles of wine, and had a great night. But he told me this amazing story about The Howling. When they were doing tests, his idea was, and Joe Dante recently told me that he wanted to do a transformation in one shot. So what Rob told me was that they built a mechanical lamp, like a desk lamp, that you could puppeteer. So if somebody hits the lamp would go away from us and then come back, and then go away from us and come back. And when it goes away from us, the light source disappears. And what you could do is you could hide the cuts in the dark part of the light source, so that if you had a werewolf head and then the lamp goes through, you take that werewolf head out, put another werewolf head in, and puppeteer the light again. So you could actually use a practical element to help hide your cuts in the transformation. And Rob told me this, and I thought, God, That's the craziest idea, because you would never think about like so he goes, yeah, I still have the lamp in my garage. So I was so like enamored with that story. And then when I talked to Joe about it, and Joe said, yeah, we wanted to do the transformation in one shot, and then we realized that it would cost way too much money, it would be too complicated, plus the amount of drama that you can extract by cutting back and forth to Dee Wallace, who's scared and cowering, and then you cut back and he's transforming, and then you're able to build much more of a sequence than if it just went in one shot. But that was 1980 when they were trying to figure that shit out. So it just really, that's the stuff that just really inspires me. That back then you didn't have the tools that you have now, where it's like, oh, just to remove that, oh, just take that out, and just that's why on my Creepshow I try to do so much stuff practically, because it just has a different feel. But I love that story about Rob, and I always thought that Rob was brilliant film technician and filmmaker.
Speaking of practical effects, Mark Tierno is still having trouble getting some of his Day of the Dead makeup off.
Tell him to call Howard. Tell him that's Howard's problem. That's not my problem. If Mark is on here, Mark, I'll send you some makeup remover. Don't you worry. But yeah, so hold on. Look, I just saw something I was gonna. Oh, what is my most prized Romero item in my collection? From Daniel. So Daniel, I have two things. I have one of the crates from Creepshow. I have the crate with all the blood on it. That was in Tom Savini's attic for years, and then he was remodeling his house, and I traded him some cool props for it. And the other thing that I have that was given to me by a prop collector friend of mine is, which I think I might want to send it to the museum, the library in Pittsburgh, is I have George's viewfinder. So, if you look at pictures of George, he always has this viewfinder, and that's what he would use to sort of set up his shots. And then he would tell Mike Gornick or, whoever, what lens he wanted. I have his actual viewfinder. I feel like I should write a Creepshow episode about somebody who uses it and then can see what the director sees. Hey, that's actually not a bad idea.
Write it down so you don't forget.
I'm gonna viewfinder. Anyway, but it's kind of that I have a lot of stuff. George gave me my first job, so I kept everything from Day of the Dead. I have stationery from the production office. I have all the call sheets, and I kept like a journal, because when the movie was over, I was like, I want to write a book about the making of Day of the Dead. And Richard and I think the producers just said, yeah, well, we have a deal with this guy, Paul Gagné, and he's writing a book called The Zombies That Ate Pittsburgh. So they thought that that would conflict with that book. But I had like a whole outline that I think I loaned to the guys that did the DVD to help sort of them to sort of base the making of on. So
I got one here from Chris from Buffalo Bill's house. Worked with you on the Joe Bob's Walking Dead special.
Yeah.
You were in charge of picking movies for the last drive-in. What two underrated gems would you choose?
There's a movie that I used to watch on Chiller Theater all the time called Twisted Nerve. I think that's what it's called. I'm going to cheat. Quentin Tarantino would be pissed at me because that's called cheating. It was a 70s NERV. Twisted Nerve. Woo! 1968. Okay. Yeah, it. Oh my God, Bernard Herrmann did the music. That can't be the right movie. I think it is. Anyway, that movie I really, really loved. And there's another one called Frogs, and again, I'm picking really shitty movies, so I don't know. I loved early 70s stuff because a lot of times I don't think they knew how to end movies in the 70s. They just like, oh, it's going to be great. And then they get to the end, you're like, oh, there's a person in the attic. Oh, like Black Christmas. Black Christmas doesn't end. They don't fucking solve the drives me crazy. But those movies, see, now if I really were to go on the drive-in and I were to pick, then I have to be underrated. I would watch The Exorcist and The Thing, because those are two movies that I would love to talk about. Of course, I'm not going into the obvious Romero movies, but Twisted Nerve. Oh yeah, look at that. Frogs, terrible movie, but loved it. Frogs is a great movie poster. That's all I can say.
Jason had a question. Could you maybe cover what pranks happened behind the scenes on Day?
Oh God, there were so many. It was kind of funny because at that point in Tom's career, he was the king of the world. Tom was the king of the world. That was it. And we were all, I think I might have been the oldest. So that would have been I was 20 and the youngest was 18. So you had 7 guys between 18 and 21 working on the movie. And Tom liked to remind us that he was Tom Savini. So every time he reminded us that he was Tom Savini, we would play a prank on him. And they got a little crazy a couple times. We at one point we were playing pranks on other departments, and the one department hooked a smoke bomb up to our car, and the fuse was on the headlight. So when we turned the car on, the fuse had to ignite and blow the smoke bomb. So there was like 15 people hiding outside of the Wampa Mines, and we all pile into this shitty car to drive back to the hotel. And we turn the car on and we start going down the hill to get on the freeway, and the smoke bomb hadn't gone off yet. So the crew guys that had put the smoke bomb in the car were like, oh my God, they're all going to die because they're going to be on the freeway and the smoke bomb's going to go off. And then probably 15 seconds before I pulled the car onto the freeway, the whole car filled with smoke. And Tom started screaming fire, and the doors flew open. I think Tom crawled over other people to get out of the car. I can't remember. So we all dove out of the car, and we just left. The car just kept going. Like, I don't even remember how the car stopped, because it was this really shitty station wagon that Tom bought. So we didn't care about it. So we would trash it. So we just jumped out, and it just kept going. And then we look up the hill, and all the crew's up there laughing. Yeah, we did a lot of stupid shit. It was fun. It was all harmless except for almost dying in the car on the freeway.
I know someone had asked earlier to talk about the fire extinguisher story.
Oh yeah, well, there was a big run where we were playing jokes on Charles Carroll, who was the accountant. So at one point, I think we super glued his phone down, and then there was this thing that Tom had that was like, would measure. You could do a tracing of your profile, and Tom would put graphite on it and then lay it up against your face. He goes, oh, let's see what your profile looks like. And he would put this thing on, and of course it would leave this big black line on your face. And then we would never tell him. So the people would come in and he would do that, and then they would walk away. And I think Charles was one of the ones that put the smoke bomb in our car. And then at one point, Tom and Everett were playing pranks on each other. Oh, I know what it was. So in the doorway to our shop was called Savini Land. That was, there was a little sign on the door. It said Savini Land, and that was our shop. So Tom's desk was at the back corner, and he would always put a pile of gunpowder right at the door with an igniter in it. And the wire would run all the way back to his desk. So if somebody would walk in, and he would just go, poof, and it would blow up this pile of gunpowder. So we would always say, "Who are we going to blow up today?" So he did that all the time, and you'd be afraid to walk in the door because he thought you were going to get blown up next. And then at one time, I think Tom blew up Everett. And then Everett got pissed and grabbed the fire extinguisher. And right as he spun the fire extinguisher to shoot it at Tom, Tom ran at him and went, "Ugh!" And he did that and inhaled all the fire extinguisher, and he got abrasions on his eye. He had an eye patch for a couple days. So that was the fire extinguisher. So it was Everett Burrell. But I'm telling you, the getting blown up. Oh, fuck, that was so funny. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm 12 years old again. That's just how juvenile we were. Not very smart. But
Stephanie asks, Greg, do you ever think about making the original Day script into a movie, and do you think it should be made into a movie?
Well, it would be a great movie. Oh, there's my cousin Frank. Oh crap! Hi, Frank.
Hey, Frank.
Frank is, those of you from Pittsburgh, Frank is a very, very talented stand-up comedian, host of Street Smarts, and the star of the Christmas episode of Creepshow. And he did a really good job. So he wants to know if there's going to be a sequel. There will, but I don't know if your character is going to make it. Well, wait, what did he just write?
Who's your favorite cousin?
Oh, I don't think he made it either. Sorry, what was the question before Frank so rudely interrupted our great interview?
The Day sequel.
Oh, yeah, it's I sure would love to see that movie.
I'm sorry, not the Day sequel, but the original
script. The original Day script. I would love to see that movie. And it was, I always loved the way he would write, and if there was like a machine gun and he would like blam, 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 but they had one character named Nitro, and when they snuck into the facility, they made incisions on this character's skin and slid vials of nitroglycerin into the skin, which I thought was brilliant. And then, of course, at the end, one of the zombies grabs her and bites her and comes out with a vial of nitroglycerin, and the zombie just kind of takes it and drops it, and it just ruined the ending of the movie, so we don't have to make it. But I would definitely watch it. So anyway,
let's see. Searching through the questions here.
I know Rodrigo had asked, do you like Knight Riders?
I do like Knight Riders. I'm probably the least familiar with Knight Riders as his other movies. I think maybe just because I was the ravenous horror fan. I've seen it a bunch of times, but I think in terms of George's movies, there are other movies of his that I fancy more. If that's a nice way of saying it. Like, I feel like Martin is a tremendously underrated movie, and really fascinating social commentary. So
someone named Mike Fisher Hey, isn't that Tom Savini's
That's Mike
assistant?
Belcher. That's Mike
know.
Belcher. Hi, Mikey.
Friend of the show, Mike.
Yes. Yeah. So, look, guys, this is, I think we should do like a monthly, like thing. We didn't even talk about anything. I mean, we talked about stuff, but we didn't get really, I mean, Frank Nicotero's here. We could do an hour just on him. So we'll have to do this again.
Yeah. I know we had talked about it. We'll do a series: Dawn of the Greg, Day of the Greg.
Yeah, Night of Living Greg. I don't steal my idea, Matt. That was my
I said
idea.
we. That's.
Hey, I came up with Diary of the Greg. All right.
Yeah, you guys. All right, so let's just clear the slate for a minute. I jokingly said we should do this, and we'll do Night of Living Greg, Dawn of the Greg, and then of course Diary of the Greg would be all the illicit stuff about the actresses and the shit that the parties and stuff that we shouldn't ever talk about.
What would a season of the Greg be about?
I don't know. I think that would be after Diary. I think that would be the mellow, like sort of more psychedelic, thought-provoking interview.
Yeah, we got there's when we're on part 12, there's always Greg.
Well, that could be part 1, and then we could segue.
Greg shines.
All right. What have I created here?
It just keeps working.
I'm telling you.
No, we from Matt and myself and Suze Romero, thank you so much for breaking off some time, spending some time on GARF Network tonight, and I think Matt already set it off air, but we'll make time for you whenever you got it. So we really appreciate you coming on the air tonight.
Yeah, look, guys, thanks for letting me come on and ramble for an hour and a half, and it's fun. There was stuff that I hadn't thought about Everett spraying Savini in the face with a fire extinguisher in 30 years. So that was a good memory.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. You've got stories upon stories, and everyone loves hearing them. I mean, you've been watching the chat, and so have I, and everyone has just been eating it up and loving it. So you're a great storyteller. Well,
we should get Howard and Everett, and we should do like the makeup effects crew from Day of the Dead, and because Tom won't remember any of these stories. Everett will remember a couple of them. Howard will remember. Howard will be pretty good. Maybe we can get Mike Tursick. It would just be.
Let's do it. It would
just be fun,
Let's do it. Maybe that can be the next one.
Yeah,
part 2.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. Remember to stop by thegarf.org and donate before the end of the month for the scholarship endowment, and we will see you on Wednesday night for our Halloween special. Until
and listen, if the other thing too is Matt and Eric, I'm happy to sign photos and send some stuff over. So if you guys want to donate and get a free signed photo or a Creepshow poster or something, you just reach out to the foundation, and then you guys tell me what you need, and I'll sign it and send it.
Sounds good, man.
How great would that be, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm just contact the GARF, and we'll take care of you. And thanks, and we appreciate you offering that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
thank you, bud. You're the best.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Everybody, have a great week.
All right, we'll see you Wednesday.
See you,
Thanks,
bud.
everybody. Bye-bye.